You know, there's this idea floating around out there. Maybe you've heard it. Getting old means falling apart. Well, thanks for the pep talk, right? According to them, whoever they are, aging is just one long, slow slide into forgetfulness, sore knees, and becoming very familiar with your living room recliner. You're supposed to be tired, confused, and calling your grandson by the dog's name. But here's the thing. That's not the whole story. In fact, it might not even be the real story. And that's exactly why I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to Buddhist Wisdom for the Elderly, your cozy little corner of the internet where we mix ancient insight with a good dose of humor and occasionally a nap. This isn't a place that sees aging as a problem to be fixed. It's where we remember together that this chapter of life isn't about disappearing quietly. It's about deepening. It's about getting lighter, wiser, and yes, sometimes a little creakier, but with grace. Science, bless its heart, is finally catching up to what the Buddha was saying all along. That the little things, how you move, how you breathe, how you love, and how you let go, are the real secrets to living well into your 70s, 80s, and beyond. And guess what? Some of you are already doing these things and don't even realize you're spiritual ninjas in disguise. So stick around, because I'm about to share 10 small signs that you might be not just aging well, but thriving in ways most people overlook. And don't skip part number 6. It's about that sacred nighttime ritual called sleep. Yes, the one you spend half the night chasing. But when you get it right, it calms your heart, clears your mind, boosts your immune system, and lets you wake up feeling a little less like a confused time traveler and a little more like your old, beautiful self. So if you enjoy videos that are equal parts wisdom, laughter, and gentle reminders that you're doing better than you think, hit that like button and subscribe. Help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers so we can keep showing up for you with more videos, more stories, and more spiritual chuckles. Because hey, we're all just walking each other home. Let's enjoy the walk. Now, let's begin. 1. Grocery bags and the meaning of life. Marvin never thought much about carrying things. He had spent decades hauling groceries, kids, suitcases, and on one particularly regrettable occasion, a refrigerator up a flight of stairs with nothing but sheer willpower and a questionable sense of physics. Strength? He had it. Always had. Until one day, he didn't. It happened at the grocery store. A perfectly normal afternoon. A perfectly normal checkout line. He loaded his bags like he always did, one in each hand, maybe an extra one over the wrist for efficiency. But as he walked to his car, something felt off. His fingers tingled, his arms ached. By the time he got home, he had to pause at the front steps, staring at the bags like they were some kind of cosmic joke. His wife glanced over. "Need help?" Oh no, absolutely not. Marvin did not need help. He was just observing the moment. That evening, as he sat on his porch, rubbing his sore hands, he thought about a Buddhist story he had once heard. A young monk asked his teacher, "How do I hold on to my strength as I grow older?" The teacher chuckled and said, "Ah, my dear, it's not about how you hold on. It's about what you let go." Marvin sighed. Fine, maybe it was time to do something about this. The next morning, he dug through his junk drawer and found an old stress ball, probably from a doctor's office or a bank giveaway. Who knows? He started squeezing it absent-mindedly while watching the news. After a few days, he added some wrist exercises, then some light weights. Nothing too dramatic. He wasn't trying to join the circus, just trying to avoid having to call his wife for backup every time he carried the groceries inside. Weeks passed. One day, back at the store, he grabbed his bags, walked to his car, and, without even thinking, lifted them with ease. No tingling, no hesitation. Just him, standing strong, like the capable human being he knew he still was. And that's when he realized this whole thing had never been about groceries. It had been about him. About trusting his body, his strength, and maybe, just maybe, letting go of the idea that getting older meant getting weaker. Try this. Next time you go shopping, see how your hands feel. If the bags feel light, fantastic. If not, grab a stress ball, do some grip exercises, and remind yourself, life isn't about how much you carry, it's about making sure you can keep carrying what matters. 2. Balancing on one foot. A spiritual experience, or just a way to not fall over? Let's talk about George. Now, our George wasn't exactly what you'd call a thrill seeker. His idea of an extreme sport was making it to the bathroom at 3 a.m. without turning on the light. But he had always prided himself on being steady, solid. The kind of guy who could put on his socks standing up, no chair, no hesitation, like some kind of enlightened sock master. And then one morning, it happened. The great wobble of 23. 1 foot up, sock in hand, and suddenly, whoa, his body went rogue. He flailed, grabbed onto the dresser like it was the last lifeboat on the Titanic, and barely saved himself from an unplanned meeting with the floor. Well, he muttered, adjusting his dignity, that was new. Of course, the logical explanation was obviously that the floor had shifted. Maybe an earthquake. Definitely a structural issue, not a him issue. But deep down, he knew. That night, sitting on his porch, he found himself remembering something a Buddhist teacher had once said. Balance isn't about resisting the fall, it's about moving with the wobble. You are not the rock in the river, you are the river itself. Right. Be the river. The next morning, George declared war on gravity. He started lifting 1 foot while waiting for his coffee to brew. At first, his body acted like a stubborn old dog, refusing to cooperate, swaying in protest. But little by little, it got better. 10 seconds turned into 15. 1 sock became 2. One morning, he even threw in a little victory dance, just to show the universe he still had it. And the best part? That feeling of still being in the game. Of knowing his body wasn't giving up on him yet. That maybe, just maybe, there was still a little flamingo left in this old man. Try this. 1. Stand near something not wobbly. 2. Lift 1 foot, preferably on purpose. 3. Hold for 10 seconds, or however long your pride allows. If you can do it, great. If you wobble, even better. That means you're alive. Keep practicing. After all, life isn't about staying perfectly still. It's about learning to dance with the wobble. Number 3. Stairs. The universe's favorite pop quiz. Elliot used to have no opinion on stairs. They existed. They got him from one place to another. They were just stairs. Until one day, they became the enemy. It happened at his favorite bookstore, a cozy little place with a cat that ignored him and an old man who worked the register like he had seen it all, because he probably had. As usual, Elliot grabbed his book, paid, and headed for the exit, only to be confronted by 6 measly steps leading up to the street. No big deal, right? Except, halfway up, his legs started feeling suspiciously like overcooked spaghetti. By the time he reached the top, he wasn't admiring the sky. He was pretending to check his watch, giving himself an excuse to catch his breath and definitely not admit that 6 tiny steps had just schooled him. That night, as he sat in his recliner, a chair that, let's be honest, had probably been enabling his lack of movement for years, he thought about a Buddhist story he once read. A student asked the master, "What do I do when the path becomes difficult?" The master smiled and replied, "You keep walking." Elliot sighed. "Fine, wise old monk, I hear you." The next day, he made a decision. No more elevators. This sounded great in theory, but reality hit fast. First attempt, the mall. Took the stairs, made it to the top, and pretended to be very interested in a mannequin just to steady his breathing. Next attempt, doctor's office. Took the stairs, walked in, and had to wait an extra minute before talking so he wouldn't sound like a man on the verge of collapse. But he didn't stop. 1 flight turned into 2. 2 turned into 3. Slowly his legs got stronger. His lungs stopped throwing a tantrum every time he climbed. Then one day, he found himself back at that bookstore. The same staircase, the same 6 steps. But this time, no hesitation, no struggle, just a smooth, steady climb. And when he got to the top, he smiled. Not because he made it, but because for the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid of the stairs anymore. Your turn. Find a staircase. Walk up 10 steps. If it's easy, fantastic. If not, no worries. Just remember, life isn't about getting to the top. It's about making peace with the climb. The floor. Friend or foe? Walter hadn't thought much about the floor in years. It was just there, minding its own business, holding up the furniture, collecting the occasional lost peanut. It was only when his 5-year-old grandson, Leo, looked up at him with those big, expectant eyes and said, "Grandpa, come play on the floor," that Walter suddenly saw the floor for what it really was: a challenge. Now, in his younger years, Walter had spent plenty of time on the floor, rolling around as a kid, wrestling with his own children, even lying on the rug staring at the ceiling when life got a little too lifelike. But somewhere along the way, the floor had stopped being a place of joy and started being, well, just far away. Walter scratched his head. "How about we play at the table?" Leo's face fell and Walter's heart twinged. That night, as he sat in his favorite chair, he looked down at the floor like an old opponent he hadn't faced in years. He thought of a Buddhist story he had once heard, something about a student asking the master, "What do I do when I fall?" And the master simply saying, "You get up." Well, okay then, time for a test run. Walter took a deep breath and slowly, carefully, lowered himself to the carpet. It wasn't graceful exactly. His knees popped. His lower back muttered something rude. But he made it. Getting back up, though? Different story. He rocked forward. He wobbled. He ended up dramatically flopping onto the couch like an actor in a silent film. All right, so maybe this needed work. Every morning, he tried again and again. He grumbled. He laughed at himself. He may or may not have gotten stuck once and had to wait for his wife to walk by and offer a hand. But one evening, without thinking, he sat on the floor, tied his shoe, and stood up effortlessly. And that's when he knew. The next time Leo asked him to play, Walter didn't hesitate. He got down on the floor, stacked toy blocks, knocked them over, and when it was time to get up, he stood, no hands, no chair, just him, a full circle from childhood to now. Leo clapped. "Grandpa, you're strong." Walter smirked. "Nah, just well practiced. Try this. 1, sit on the floor. 2, get up. No hands. If you can, fantastic. If not, that's fine too. Just remember, the floor isn't your enemy. It's just testing your sense of humor." 5, walking at a brisk pace. The great shuffle toward enlightenment. Let me tell you about Raymond. Raymond was 74 and had always been a walker. Not a power walker with fancy sneakers and a smartwatch, but an old-school, hands in pockets, let's just see where the road takes us kind of walker. His morning route was sacred. A little stretch of cracked sidewalk, a neighborhood cat who either loved him or hated him depending on the day, and a park bench that had held more of his deep thoughts than any therapist ever had. But one crisp morning, life hit him with a reality check. He was walking up his usual gentle incline, more of a polite suggestion than a real hill. And suddenly, his breath decided to file for retirement. His legs, once so reliable, felt like 2 wet sandbags. He stopped, hands on his knees, looking around as if someone had snuck in and added an extra 5 miles to his usual route overnight. "This is new," he muttered, half expecting the universe to respond. Now, Raymond wasn't one for dramatics, except when discussing the rising price of coffee. But in that moment, a tiny voice whispered in his mind, "Is this how it starts?" The slow shuffle toward taking it easy, which leads to more sitting than standing, which leads to, well, we all know how that movie ends. And then, like some cosmic joke, he remembered something a Buddhist teacher had once told him years ago at a retreat. The river never stops flowing, and neither should you. Even when you feel like a rock, just keep moving with the current. Well, all right then. If a river could do it, so could he. The next day he tried again. But this time, instead of focusing on the whole walk, he just focused on one step, then another. He treated it like meditation, except with slightly more wheezing. He even tried to pick up his pace, imagining he was late for something important, like a limited-time senior discount at his favorite diner. Weeks passed, and then one morning, Raymond found himself at that same incline. But this time, no stopping, no struggling. Just him, the road, and a feeling suspiciously close to victory. And maybe, just maybe, the neighborhood cat looked at him with a little more respect that day. Try this. 1. Walk 10 feet like you're just heading to the mailbox. 2. Now speed up, like you just realized you left the stove on. If you can do this without feeling like you need a nap after, great, you're still cruising down the river. If you get winded, no worries. Just start where you are. The secret isn't speed, it's not stopping. 6. How to sleep like a Zen master, or at least like someone who doesn't stare at the ceiling at 3 a.m. Harold used to be great at sleeping. Back in the day, he could fall asleep anywhere, on a park bench, in a waiting room, once even at a wedding, which, to be fair, had a very long speech. Sleep used to come as easily as breathing. And then, somewhere along the way, it didn't. At 74, sleep had become something of a performance. He'd lie down, get comfortable, close his eyes, and then, like clockwork, his brain would decide to hold a full-blown festival of every embarrassing thing I've ever done. The headliner? That one time in 1973 when he waved back at someone who wasn't actually waving at him. And if that wasn't enough, he'd toss, turn, and wake up feeling like someone had swapped his mattress for a pile of bricks. One particularly miserable night, he got up, made some tea, and pulled an old book on Buddhism off his shelf. He flipped through it mindlessly until a passage caught his eye. To truly rest, one must first learn to let go. We do not sleep because we are tired. We sleep because we have released the day. Well, that explained a lot. Harold was trying to sleep while clutching onto everything. The worries, the what-ifs, the never-ending mental to-do list. His mind was basically a hoarder, and bedtime was when all the junk spilled out. So, he decided to try something different. Instead of watching the news before bed and getting worked up about things he couldn't control, he read something light. Instead of lying in the dark, replaying conversations from 1982, he started writing down his thoughts before bed, a little note to himself. Today is done. Tomorrow will come. Right now, I rest. At first, it didn't seem to do much. His brain still wanted to party, but he stuck with it. And then, one morning, something miraculous happened. He woke up and, wait for it, actually felt good. Not slightly less exhausted. Good. Like, maybe life doesn't require 3 cups of coffee good. As he sat on his porch sipping his morning tea, he grinned. Maybe the secret to good sleep wasn't about forcing it to happen. Maybe it was about learning to let go. Try this tonight. 1. Turn off the TV and put down the phone. Yes, even for just an hour. 2. Write down any lingering thoughts. Release them. 3. Say to yourself, right now, I rest. If you wake up feeling refreshed, fantastic. If not, don't worry. Even the Buddha probably had a few rough nights before he reached enlightenment. 7. Keeping your mind sharp, or at least remembering where you left your glasses. Leonard had always been the guy with the steel trap memory. He could recall the exact price of a gallon of milk in 1965, the lyrics to every song he loved as a teenager, and the names of all his childhood neighbors, including the ones who never even spoke to him. And then one day, it started happening. Little things at first. Walking into the kitchen and forgetting why. Searching for his glasses only to realize they were on his head. Calling his grandson by the dog's name, which, in his defense, the kid and the dog did have a similar energy. But the real wake-up call came one evening at dinner. His wife looked at him, raised an eyebrow, and asked, "Do you remember what we ate last night?" Leonard froze. Last night? Last night? That was barely 24 hours ago. He should know this, but the memory was like an old sock in the dryer, just missing. And that's when it hit him. The thing that had always been so effortless, remembering, was starting to require effort. That night, staring at the ceiling in bed, he thought about something a Buddhist teacher had once said. The mind is like a lamp. If you don't tend to it, the light flickers. But if you keep fueling it, it will shine through even the darkest nights. Well, his lamp had been dimming a little. Time to get some oil. So Leonard got to work. He dusted off his old chessboard, picked up a book that didn't have giant print, started keeping a little journal, writing down whatever came to mind, even if it was just, "Today I remembered where I put my keys." Victory. And here's the funny thing. His brain started waking up. The foggy moments still happened, but they didn't scare him anymore. One evening at dinner, his wife smirked and asked, "So what did we eat last night?" Leonard smirked right back. "Salmon, roasted potatoes, and those green beans you make that I pretend to like." She burst out laughing. "I knew it." Leonard grinned. He might not remember everything, but he was still here. Try this. 1. Try to recall what you had for dinner 2 nights ago. 2. Memorize a short list of words and repeat them in 10 minutes. If you nail it, fantastic. If you struggle, no worries. Your lamp just needs a little more oil. Keep reading, keep playing, keep laughing. And if all else fails, just pretend you were too enlightened to care about what you ate. 8. Practicing mindfulness. Meditation for people who think too much, which is everyone. If your mind is anything like mine, it's like an overexcited puppy, jumping from one thought to the next. Did I leave the stove on? Why do my knees sound like bubble wrap? Whatever happened to that guy I dated in 1962? Enter mindfulness. Now don't worry, you don't need to sit on a mountaintop in a robe chanting Om while levitating over a river. Although, if you can do that, please teach me. Mindfulness is just noticing, watching, breathing, being. And here's the kicker. Science loves it. Meditation lowers blood pressure, reduces anxiety, improves sleep, and even keeps your brain younger. Turns out all those monks were onto something. Meet Ernest, 76. Ernest used to think meditation was for people who wore hemp pants and ate kale chips. But after a health scare, his daughter gave him a meditation app. "Just 5 minutes, Dad," she said. So he rolled his eyes and gave it a try. 5 minutes turned into 10, then 20. He didn't become the Dalai Lama, but he did stop yelling at the toaster every time it burned his bagel. He said, "It's like someone finally gave me a remote for my brain, and I found the mute button." Try this. 1. Sit down or lie down if your body's had enough of sitting down today. 2. Close your eyes. 3. Breathe in. Breathe out. Watch your thoughts like clouds. No judgment. Start with 5 minutes. If your mind wanders, congratulations, you're human. Bring it back gently, again and again. Because peace doesn't mean nothing's happening. It means everything's happening, and you're okay with it. As Ram Dass would say, the quieter you become, the more you can hear. Especially the voice inside that says, you're doing just fine. 9. Staying socially connected. Love, laughter, and the weekly bridge club. Here's the thing about getting older. Yes, the knees creak, the memory skips a beat, and suddenly spicy food becomes a calculated risk. But the real kicker? Sometimes it's not what hurts that gets you. It's what's missing. Connection. We humans are funny creatures. We spend our younger years trying to get away from people. I just need some space. And then in our older years, we realize, oh right, people are the whole point. Science backs this up, by the way. Loneliness in older adults has been linked to everything from heart disease to memory loss. Apparently, your body isn't just running on water and fiber, it needs other humans, too. The Buddha called this Sangha, the spiritual community. He didn't say it was a nice addition, he said it was essential. As in, no path, no peace, no awakening without your fellow wanderers along for the ride. Take Rosa, 81. Rosa had grown comfortable in her quiet. But after years of watching game shows and talking to her houseplants, who, to be fair, were excellent listeners, she saw a flyer for a Tea and Tales group at the library. Against all odds, and against her inner voice saying, "What if it's awkward?" she went. And guess what? People remembered old songs she loved. They shared stories that made her laugh until she cried. They saw her, not just as an old woman, but as a storyteller, a sister, a sage. Try this. Call someone you love. Join a group. Wave at your neighbor like you mean it, because connection isn't a luxury. It's the medicine we didn't know we needed. As Ram Dass might say, we're all just walking each other home. Might as well chat along the way. 10. The chair test. The enlightenment of falling on your butt. Let me tell you a story about Thomas. Now, Thomas wasn't just any old man. He was the kind of guy who used to wrestle with time itself. A carpenter by trade, his hands had once shaped the world. His legs had climbed ladders like they were stairways to heaven. But at 77, his body had decided to become a comedian. One evening, Thomas sat in his favorite chair, sipping tea and contemplating the great mysteries of life, like why his back hurt for no reason. When he tried to stand up, his legs gave him a solid nope. He wobbled, flailed, and, in a last-ditch effort to maintain dignity, planted both hands firmly on the armrests and hoisted himself up like a reluctant old oak in a storm. A small thing, barely noticeable. But in his heart, he knew he had crossed into a new reality, one where standing up was no longer a guarantee. That night, lying in bed, he remembered a Buddhist monk he once met in Thailand, a man so still and balanced he could probably stand up without even touching the ground. The monk had told him, "Strength isn't in the muscles, my friend. It's in the surrender. If you resist aging, it drags you by the collar. If you dance with it, you just might learn a few new moves." So Thomas decided to dance. The next morning, instead of grumbling about his legs, he turned his daily getting-up struggle into a spiritual practice. He sat in his chair, crossed his arms, and tried to stand without using his hands, wobbled, fell back down, laughed, tried again. And here's the thing, his legs were listening. Slowly, they woke up. Every time he pushed himself up, he'd whisper, "Still here, still moving, still me." Months passed, and one day, without thinking, he stood up, easy as breathing. His wife, watching from the doorway, raised an eyebrow. "You finally figured it out, huh?" Thomas grinned. "Nah, I just stopped trying so hard." Now it's your turn. 1. Sit in a chair. 2. Cross your arms like a Zen master. 3. Stand up without using your hands. If you do it easily, wonderful. If you wobble, even better. You're human. And if you fall back into the chair, well, welcome to the club. The point isn't just standing up, it's waking up. So if you can still do these 10 things, carry a grocery bag, climb stairs, get up from the floor without groaning too dramatically, you're not just doing okay. You're a walking, breathing miracle of graceful aging. But even if a few of these felt like a stretch, literally or metaphorically, don't worry. This isn't a test, it's a journey. And in case no one's told you today, it's never too late to feel a little more alive in your own skin. Tiny efforts, practiced with patience and a little sense of humor, can bring big changes over time. Remember what the Buddha probably would have said if you were holding a yoga mat. Enlightenment comes one wobble at a time. So here's your invitation, dear friend. Let me know in the comments, which of these signs are alive and well in your life, and which ones are asking for a little more love and attention. I'd love to hear your stories, and if this video made you smile, nod, or quietly think, okay, maybe I'm doing all right after all, then click that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Because here at Buddhist Wisdom for the Elderly, we're not chasing youth. We're celebrating wisdom, humor, and the wild adventure that aging can still be. You've earned your laugh lines, you've earned your stillness, and you've absolutely earned your place here with us. So until next time, stay curious, stay kind to your body, and if you can, take the stairs. We'll see you again soon.